Welcome to the Women in Wealth podcast, brought to you by Regina McCann HESS, a certified financial planner with over 2 decades of experience. This show is for professional women who want guidance in working towards their retirement vision in learning, building, planning, striving for your dreams, and putting the work in now so that you can pursue your financial independence. Hello, I'm Regina McCann HESS, president of Forge Wealth Management, and welcome to our Women in Wealth series. Today, we're going to talk about philanthropy. And what does that mean to you? Does that mean just, oh, hey, I want to give my money away? Yes, and a little bit more than that. What's your outlook on philanthropy? Does it include the causes and organizations that you care about most? What are the different ways to give? And then how do you create a giving plan? And why should you share your giving intentions with your family members? And how is that going to preserve your legacy? So those are some of the things that we'll unpack today. And the other thing I'm going to unpack, and this is really for women, because we tend to think of philanthropy as our wealth grows. In fact, a lot of us tend to give our money away at death. We leave bequests in our will, whereas men tend to give a little bit differently. There's no right or wrong. It's just looking at the statistics of how different people give. In fact, I know when I attend conferences, there's a little bit of a difference there too. So when I attend a mixed conference, like it's financial, it's men and women, they talk about philanthropy as education for us as advisors for how to guide our clients with giving their money away, creating their legacy, things like that. They don't talk about giving our own money away or how we can be philanthropic as our own individual people. It's more applied to our clients. However, when I have attended female-only conferences, not every single time, but I would probably say about 75% of the time, there's actually an event tied to the conference, either before or at the end of the conference, where they have the women come in early or late to do some kind of event that helps a nonprofit. And I'm like, I attend them, I participate, and then I have to sit back and wonder, why don't they do that at the mixed, men and women event? And it just must go back to, and I don't know the answer, it must just go back to how men and women give, right? So we tend to give a lot with our time as women. And again, not saying that men don't, but we do tend to see a lot of volunteers, women with that. So that's one of the things that we talk about within our own groups, with the conferences. What are some of the organizations? Like, we have free open conversations. What types of organizations do you volunteer at? Do you do enough volunteering? Things like that. So it's quite a different aspect of philanthropy between men and women sometimes. So that's just an observation that I've noticed over time. It's also not just giving money. Sometimes you can donate your time, your effort, and obviously your cash. Women do tend to, as we're raising our families, we tend to put everybody else first. We're like a nature nurture type of feeling. And that does tend to come across when we tend to give our money later in life as opposed to earlier in life, with some of the statistics that I've read. How do you plan it right? There's practice of service, community engagement. Philanthropic giving can be deeply enriching to your lives and also have a lasting impact for the community that you're trying to support. And the first thing that you want to do before you hand over that hard-earned dollar, the first thing you want to do is make sure they align, the nonprofits, they align with your visions and your values, and the gifts and the activities are what you care about most. So, I'm an animal lover, and so for me to give to an animal nonprofit would make sense, but maybe I'm not like the outdoorsy person that I want to be. I'm just not there yet. So I would maybe be less inclined to give to an organization like that. But I think it's important to make sure animals are treated well, or our veterans are treated well. Everyone has their own thing that they feel is a little bit more important to them. So think about that. Think about your philanthropy in terms of what's important to you. Who would you like to see benefit from your donations along that way before you start writing checks, right? Okay, so another pattern, and I think I mentioned this already that I mentioned or that I noticed, is that men tend to give to along the way, they tend to give a little bit more that way. And specifically to their alma maters, like their high schools, their colleges, things like that, where they have forged valuable connections or they've earned their degrees. I have watched this from a bird's eye viewpoint with boys' high schools and versus girls' high schools. Obviously, I have two sons that went to an all boys school, and then I have a daughter who went to an all girls school. And I see the donations that the boys' schools get, and it is astounding. And then I see the girls' schools scrape for every dollar that they can get. And I don't know why. It's just that's how it is. And could it be something that if it's important to us, can we change? Absolutely. But again, it has to be the right thing for you. And again, like I said, a lot of women will bequest money in their wills. So maybe that money comes later. But it's, again, that's just an experience to share, to show the differences between sometimes how men and women donate their money. It doesn't mean that women don't value their education. That's definitely not the experience. Like I said, I think the men donate throughout their lifetime, and then they nurture those connections with the schools and the individuals that they have seen instrumental with their success. And like I said, women tend to leave larger, usually one-time estate donations to the schools through their wills. That could tend to reflect the woman's tendency to first take care of those closest to home, like their families, then carefully select the philanthropic endeavors that most align with their visions and values of the impact that they want to have on hand. And then when it comes to that part of your financial planning, I would hope that this is part of your financial planning conversation. We always want to go back to that conversation of the visions and values. And you want to see and explore how philanthropy, holy mackerel, that's a really long word to say multiple times, might come into play. So sometimes you just want to jot down a short list of causes that you care about. That would be a great way to start. Like I said, I like animals and I care very much about our veterans. That's my short list. Obviously, I'm very active in a homeless shelter in my area. I've been involved with them for a long time. So that's also an area that is important to me. You have to think about which on your list, what specific nonprofits are you interested in, especially ones that you already donate time to, and you donate money, or maybe some of your professional services. Or you might be in a stage of your life where you're like, yeah, these are things I want to do, but I just can't yet. You can still at least make that list of when I do have time, when I do have extra money. These are the types of organizations that would be important to me and that I would want to donate to or donate my time or my professional services to. Just even if you're not there yet, you can at least start having that conversation about what you would want to do if you were in the position to do it. Right. And sometimes it could be any number of different areas. It could be medical research. Obviously, there's specific diseases or cancers or rare diseases, things like that people are passionate about. There's arts, there's educational, there's environmental protection, veterans. The list goes on and on. We can write these values into our wills, and with the right planning, we can support these causes throughout our lives while also trying to make sure our own financial security is there and taking care of our families while we're there. I have a friend who she went on a trip, like an African safari, and it really actually changed the course of how she gave money and her impact on the community. So she obviously went to Africa for the safari, and she formed a decades-long relationship with a small community in Africa as a result of this, and founded an orphan and a school for the local children. In order to do that, she had to not only just send money, she had to spend a lot of time and make the right connections to make this happen, because obviously she lives in the United States, so it's hard to do something like that from a long way away. So there had to be a lot of groundwork there, and she had to have these kids, this community had to have such a huge impact on her that changed her, the way she looked at philanthropy, the way she looked at her own life to see what she had and what these people were missing. But sometimes that's how it happens. This was not something she went there and planned for. Sometimes philanthropic impulses just catch us by surprise. And in her case, a vacation changed her life and the lives of hundreds of children that orphanage served. Could be, again, not something that you thought was going to happen, and it just caught your attention and it caught your heartstrings. So that was pretty cool. Obviously, this is something that her and her family have held near and dear to their hearts. They've also brought their kids into this, and so their kids realize how important this is. They've brought their kids back to see the community growing, so they know, the kids know that this is their parents' legacy and what they want. How much of an impact is that? You bring your kids to a community where you've done all this work and you're seeing, children now growing up and having some success because of something your family has been involved with. I would say that would be a pretty big impact on your family members. One, they donated money. They found a cause that was important to them. They took care of their family. They invested in their own children and their education. They maxed out all their retirement funds, but they also made a place in their plan for giving money back to the community. Now, this was an international community, not a local community, and that's okay. It has to be what's in your heart and what's important to you. And just a chance encounter sparked this new connection, the idea. It enriched the lives of this family and hundreds of people along the way. So you want to bear in mind that legacy can't be measured in dollar amounts. We don't all have thousands or millions of dollars to invest or donate to anything in particular, but every little bit along the way helps, and we can at least contribute to some kind of charitable activity. And at the end of the day, small donor support is how operations survive and thrive. That's really important to make note of. Doing a little bit can sometimes go a long way. Many of my clients and friends also donate as part of their annual financial planning, whether or not it's to the churches, like a tithing type of situation, religious organizations, schools, or causes that are important to them. But unsurprisingly, people tend to be more philanthropic when the market is booming. For the past 2 years, we've had double-digit returns. Everything has looked sunny. And so I bet you if we looked, the donations have been up. But when times are tough, that tends to fall off the cliff a little bit. So talking about that, like recessions or bear markets, nonprofits really suffer through that. So for example, in 2008, I don't know if you all remember, when the markets tanked by about 40%, I think we can all remember how awful that was. Nonprofit contributions dried up because people were looking at their statements and saying, I can't give money away right now. I just lost all this money in the stock market. And there were just fear. There's just a lot of fear there. They stopped giving money away because they felt like they couldn't give it away. And then again, charitable donations dropped again considerably in 2020, in part due to the pandemic, but also because we couldn't do any in-person events at one point, or very little in-person events. And that's how a lot of nonprofits raised their money. A lot of different impacts on the nonprofits as well as us individually. So when we're hurting, usually they're hurting a little bit more. That's another reason that you could give throughout your life. For one thing, a lot of charitable donations can come with a tax benefit, but more importantly, philanthropy builds meaning and purpose into your life. It could also help forge connections with the communities and causes that you care about. With my retirees, it's very cool. I see a lot of my retirees, they now have time to do things that they've always wanted to do. They now have the time to donate to areas where they have wanted to for so many years. And regular charitable giving seems to be associated with greater happiness and even stronger healthy outcomes. I know one of my clients, I have clients that volunteer at so many different things, but the one client that's come in my mind right now is a gentleman who volunteers for Habitat for Humanity. He's in his 80s. He's been volunteering now for probably 2 decades there, maybe 3, and loves every minute of it. He's giving back by donating his time and his talents and helping building houses. When we talk about it, the smile on his face tells me the world, right? It is like beneficial. It gives you something back too. So that's really cool. It's something we don't think about a lot. So, how to weave your philanthropy into your financial plan. What can you give away now? What can you give away later? When can you donate your time now? When you retire, could that be part of your retirement vision like this gentleman's was? Obviously, if you're donating money, you want to make sure it's a cause that's important to you. And obviously, if you're going to get a tax donation, it has to be a 501c3 organization, like an official nonprofit. And there's different ways you can do this. You can write a check each year. You get receipts, you claim your tax credit. There's a bunch of different ways, but here's 2 other ways I'm going to talk about. You can give stocks to a nonprofit organization. You can also give them money out of your IRA. So we're going to talk about that as well. And there's tax benefits, but they look a little bit different for each. So say you have XYZ stock, right? And you have a considerable gain on that stock. You could use that 2 different ways. You could sell it, pay the taxes on it, and write a check to your charity. Or you can actually donate the stock shares directly to the charity. And let's just say it's $10,000 that you want to give them. So you give them a certain amount of shares that add up to $10,000. They get the whole $10,000. They get the shares, right? The value of it. You get a tax deduction of $10,000. So your accountant's, yes, good job. And then they do with it whatever they need to do to help their organization. You get that full $10,000 write off on your taxes. Whereas if you sold that stock to create the $10,000, and let's just say the cost basis was $8,000, you now have to pay tax on that $2,000 gain. So if you're doing it that way, it's not as efficient maybe as donating the stock directly because you have to pay possibly capital gains on that. And so less is getting to them if you're going to take out the tax bill and give them the remainder of it. So that's just one thing to think about. And obviously your accountant can talk you through that as well. It's something, anytime you do that, you want to talk to your financial professional, you want to talk to your accountant. Is this a good idea? Does it work for my financial situation? That kind of stuff is really important. And then also the other way is through your IRA. You can give what's called a qualified charitable distribution from your IRA. More alphabet soup, right? QCD. That's what we're referring to it. So when you are a certain age, right now, if you're 73, you have to take what's called a required minimum distribution, or RMD for short. And actually, you can start this before 73, but you can, instead of your required distribution, you can donate that money directly to a nonprofit organization that has a 501c3 directly from your IRA, and therefore you don't have to pay tax on that distribution. And it could be the full amount of the required distribution, or it could be just a portion of it. If your distribution amount is $50,000, I'm not saying you have to give them the full $50,000. Maybe you give them 10, whatever the amount is that you would normally give them, you can give it from your IRA. And that way they still get the full amount. You don't have to pay taxes on that money and the amount that you give them. And it counts as part of your required minimum distribution. So remember, let's pretend that your required minimum distribution is $50,000 and you just want to give them $10,000, right? So you give them 10, like using the qualified charitable distribution method, and then you take the rest for yourself for spending. So you take the remaining $40,000 out as a required minimum distribution. You get credit for the full 50. You just have to pay tax on the 40 because you distributed the 40 to yourself. So it can be a win-win that way too. Now, is this something that you should do without thinking about your financial plan or talking to your financial advisor or your CPA? What do you think? No, we want to talk to the financial professionals before we do something like this, right? Because it can impact your taxes. Obviously, we're trying to think about tax strategies for you, and this helps you with your tax strategy. It also helps you with your philanthropy. I have been doing it with some of my clients, and it's a way for them to to give money to organizations that they want to help, and they get to see the company or the organizations use that money and how they're using that money, and they get like good feelings from that and good feedback, and they see that the organization hopefully is using their money properly. So that's the other way that you can do the contributions. Obviously, you want to make a giving plan, whether or not it's with your financial advisor, with your accountant, obviously with your family members, your spouse, and you may not align exactly with your spouse, but that's okay. You can each have your organizations that you want to donate to. It doesn't have to be match exactly, but maybe have a conversation and so that you can be aligned with each other. And you want to just, again, review your core values and then find your charitable contributions that reflect those values. Sometimes during the year, I write numerous checks throughout the year for nonprofits because somebody brought a charity to my attention or a friend's doing something with that organization, and I want to support the organization and I want to support my friend. And then at the end of the year, I'll look at things and be like, oh, I need to donate a little bit more money. And sadly, the homeless shelter that I'm so involved with, I'm moving around so much and I'm donating some of my time. At the end of the year, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I don't think I donated enough to them because I'm doing all these other things. You write that check at the end of the year, you get it done, and then you try to be better the next year. So that's one of the things to do. And again, donating time is important too, because you're seeing where the bread is made essentially and how they're doing it. So that's very important. And like I said, some folks want to direct most of their charitable gifts to local community. And one of the examples I gave you, sometimes they're more broad-reaching, international, even like the Red Cross. So it all works as long as it works for you. There's no right or wrong way to give, and it mainly comes down to your individual preferences, your personal values, and what means the most to you and your family. Wealth management means more than just taking care of yourself and your loved ones. It also relates to how you invest in communities and the causes you care about. While women sometimes lack confidence in their financial decision-making compared to men, we are just as capable. And it's not saying that we can't make these decisions. We just need a little bit more encouragement. And sometimes it's because we haven't been raised that way. I talk to women all the time and they're afraid to make these financial decisions. But as they make more and more of them, they become more confident with those decisions, which is a beautiful thing. I think it comes down to showing up, getting a little bit more comfortable. Each time it gets even more comfortable. Having the conversations with your partners, with your financial advisor, even with your children and grandchildren. It's okay to talk about money. It is not the taboo topic that we were all raised to believe. It's not supposed to be a dirty little secret. And it's a reflection of your hard work, your good planning, and your unique values. That is your legacy. So how do you want to live and how do you want your life to be remembered? Whatever those answers are, it's essential to discuss those visions and values with your family, both to educate them and to ensure that they honor your wishes. While we're hard at work, we're planning, we have some noble wishes. Open communication will mean nothing if you don't protect your estate through proper paperwork and documentation. So while we want you to talk to your family members and we want them to know what your intentions are, you got to write it down and you have to update your will. You have to update your beneficiaries. So many times people don't update their will and it's not really a reflection of what they had spoken about. So this is another opportunity for you to think about, does my current will line up with my current values? Does my current will line up with who I really do want to have my money? And does it include some of my charities that I want to show my legacy to? So if the answer doesn't line up, it might be time to speak to your estate planning attorney and maybe update that will. That was not supposed to be part of what I was talking about, but it never hurts to take a look at your will and update it. So with that, I think the call to action today is obviously let's look at what your core values are as far as what your charitable donations will be and line them up with what you are doing or what you want to be doing and go from there. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me. Again, I'm Regina McCann HESS, president of Forge Wealth Management. My website is forgewealth.com. My Facebook and Instagram and YouTube are at Forge Wealth, and LinkedIn is Regina MCCANN HESS. Go make it a great day. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Women in Wealth podcast. You can watch the founder's video I created for you to learn more about me and how I can guide you towards your financial independence at www.forgewealth.com. The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific, individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision. Securities are offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, and SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Forge Wealth Management are separate entities from the LPL Financial. Our show guests and their companies are not affiliated with nor endorsed by LPL Financial, Private Advisor Group, or Forge Wealth Management.